She said it was just one night with her dream man. But that night rebuilt me. I never imagined betrayal could sound so casual. My wife didn't raise her voice, didn't cry, didn't even hesitate. She just looked me in the eye across our kitchen table and dropped a bomb on our marriage. "It's just one night, Ethan. With him, he's my dream man. After that, I'll come back and everything will be fine." The words didn't explode like thunder. They froze me, like standing on a frozen lake and hearing the cracks spread beneath your feet. Before I take you into the night that changed everything, let me ask you this. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to watch them shatter it in seconds? If you've been there, or fear you might, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share your own experience in the comments. You're not alone in this. I stared at her, waiting for the grin, the smirk, the "just kidding." But her lips didn't move except to sip her wine. Her calmness was worse than anger. It was indifference. My throat tightened. I wanted to shout, to slam my fist on the table, to demand what she meant. But no words came. Instead, I sat paralyzed, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. Melissa stood as if nothing monumental had happened and walked upstairs. I followed slowly, every step heavier than the last. She pulled a travel bag from the closet. I whispered, "Melissa, what are you doing?" She didn't even look at me. "Don't make this harder, Ethan. It's just one night. I need to know what it feels like." Her tone was steady, practiced, like she had rehearsed it in her head 100 times. I sat on the bed, numb, while she folded clothes. Pixel, our dog, sat at my feet, confused by the tension. I stroked his fur, trying to calm the trembling in my hands. 10 minutes later, the zipper closed. Melissa brushed past me, perfume lingering, heart already elsewhere. And then she was gone. The door shut quietly, but it was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The silence afterward roared in my ears. It was like the house itself exhaled and collapsed. I stayed on the bed until morning, staring at nothing. My mind replayed years of anniversaries, vacations, lazy mornings with coffee. Had it all been fake? When Melissa returned, the sun was up. She set her bag down, sighed, and said, "It's done. Now we can move on." Her face looked tired, but satisfied. "Move on," I croaked. "You shattered us." She frowned, annoyed. "It was just one night, Ethan. Don't be dramatic." But I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Every glance was poisoned. Every sound reminded me of her betrayal. I tried to bury myself in work, but my mind wandered. I tried to sleep, but her words echoed. "He's my dream man." That phrase burned itself into my brain. Weeks crawled by. Melissa cooked dinner, scrolled her phone, kissed me goodnight like nothing had changed. But everything had. I laughed at her jokes but felt hollow. I walked Pixel but felt heavy. Life continued, but I was bleeding invisibly. Friends invited me out, but I refused. How could I explain this shame? How could I tell them my wife chose another man, even for a night? One evening she asked, "Why are you so distant?" I said, "Because you left me, Melissa. You left me for him." She rolled her eyes. "It was one night. Stop holding a grudge." Her dismissal cut deeper than her confession. She didn't even think she had done something wrong. That night, I walked into the garage. I pulled out 2 suitcases. I began packing: shirts, jeans, laptop, documents. Pixel barked once, watching nervously. I knelt, hugged him tight, and whispered, "Yes, buddy. You're coming with me." His tail thumped against the floor. Melissa finally noticed. "What are you doing?" "Leaving," I said calmly. "I can't share a bed with someone who chose someone else." She scoffed, arms crossed. "You're overreacting." But I didn't argue. Words were meaningless between us.
I loaded the car. Pixel jumped onto the passenger seat, ears alert. Melissa stood on the porch, shaking her head. I didn't say goodbye. I turned the key, headlights cutting into the night, and I drove. Miles of highway stretched ahead. The silence of the car was heavy but cleaner than the silence at home. I felt broken, but I also felt free. At 2 a.m., I pulled into a motel in Flagstaff. The neon buzzed faintly, the sheets smelled of bleach, the AC rattled, but it was mine. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Images of Melissa with him clawed at my mind. Rage surged, then collapsed into nausea. But beneath the wreckage, something stirred. Resolve. She had broken me, but she had also freed me. "This isn't the end," I whispered to myself. "This is the reset." Pixel curled at my feet, as if agreeing. The next morning, sunlight slid through thin curtains. I brewed motel coffee, burnt and bitter, but it tasted like survival. Pixel wagged his tail, ready for a walk. I rented the room for a week, then another. I needed silence, distance, time. I jogged trails, journaled, read books I'd abandoned. At night, the pain was sharp. I heard her voice, saw her face, felt the crack in my chest. But slowly, layers of anger peeled away. I began writing goals in a notebook. Rebuild finances, rebuild strength, rebuild dignity. Each word steadied me. I stopped wearing my wedding ring. I placed it in the drawer. Cold metal, heavy chain. I was done carrying it. In the mirror, I saw a tired man, unshaven. But I also saw someone who could change. Someone new. One morning, Pixel pulled me to a park. Children laughed, couples held hands, joggers passed by. I felt envy, but also hope. Love had betrayed me. But life still offered beginnings. On a bench, I wrote, "Revenge is not anger. Revenge is living better. Melissa's betrayal reduced me to ashes, but ashes can be fertile. From them, I would grow." That night, I closed my notebook with a vow. I would not call her. I would not beg. Silence would be my answer. I would rebuild, quietly, relentlessly. And one day, the world, not Melissa, would see who I had become. She thought it was just one night, but for me, it became the night that gave birth to a different man. The motel bed was hard, the sheets rough, but I woke up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Pixel stretched at my feet, yawning like nothing had changed. For him, it was just another morning. For me, it was the first morning of a life I hadn't planned but desperately needed. I made bad motel coffee, bitter and burnt, but it tasted like survival. I sat by the window, watching cars pass on the highway, each of them carrying lives untouched by my disaster. The world hadn't stopped because my marriage had ended. That realization cut, but it also freed me. The first week was survival. I jogged in the mornings, ate cheap takeout, and stared at the ceiling at night. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I wrote until my hand cramped. In my notebook, I drew 3 columns: body, mind, money. Those were the things I needed to rebuild. Not Melissa. Not revenge. Me. I joined a local gym with a month-to-month membership. The weights were rusted, the mirrors cracked, but it didn't matter. I threw myself into squats, presses, deadlifts, sweat pouring like poison leaving my body. Each rep was a reminder. I was still here. I picked up odd jobs in Flagstaff, helping a mechanic move engines, unloading trucks for a furniture store, painting walls for cash. The money wasn't much, but it kept me afloat. It also kept my mind busy. Exhaustion, I discovered, was the best sedative for heartbreak. Nights were harder. That's when memories attacked. Melissa's laugh at the beach, her hand in mine during our wedding vows, the way she once whispered, "You're my forever." Now she had traded forever for one night.
I tried drowning the pain with whiskey. One night, after half a bottle, I looked at Pixel's sad eyes and knew I couldn't keep numbing. I needed clarity, not fog. I poured the rest down the sink. By the third week, I was running 3 miles each morning. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but my mind felt clearer. I wrote new lines in my notebook. No more excuses, no more waiting for someone else to save me. Every mile was proof I was moving forward, even if Melissa stayed in the rear view. I called an old college friend, Marcus, who lived in Phoenix. We hadn't spoken in years, but I told him I needed work. He ran a small contracting company and said he could use extra hands. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I moved from the motel into a small studio near his shop. It smelled faintly of oil and sawdust, but it was mine. Pixel quickly claimed a corner by the window, his tail wagging like he knew this was home for now. For the first time since leaving, I felt steady ground beneath my feet. Marcus paid me in cash at first. I sanded drywall, patched roofs, hauled lumber. I learned how to use tools I'd never touched before. And every payday, I tucked half the money into a savings envelope labeled Freedom. By month 3, I had calluses on my hands and 5 envelopes in my drawer. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. I wasn't rich, but I was no longer broken. I had structure, muscle, and a purpose beyond pain. At night, I sat on the balcony of my studio, writing under a single lamp. I wrote letters I never sent, to Melissa, to myself, even to the man she called her dream. They were raw, angry, sometimes pathetic, but they emptied poison from my chest. One letter read, "You thought you ended me. But you only ended the man who worshipped you. The one replacing him doesn't kneel." When I finished, I tore it up. I didn't need her to read it. I just needed to hear it aloud. Pixel became my shadow, joining me at the job sites, riding in the truck, sleeping by my bed. He reminded me daily that loyalty still existed. When I doubted myself, his wagging tail told me I wasn't alone. That dog saved me more than once. 6 months passed. My body was stronger, my savings thicker, my mind calmer, but anger still pulsed under the surface. I knew I wasn't done with my story yet. One evening, Marcus invited me to a networking mixer downtown. At first I refused. I hated crowds. But he pushed. "You need to meet people again, Ethan. You can't keep hiding behind work and sweat." So I went. The room buzzed with conversations and clinking glasses. I stood awkwardly near the edge until a woman introduced herself. Her name was Claire, a local realtor. Her handshake was firm, her smile warm. We talked about work, about dogs, about Flagstaff winters. She laughed easily, listened intently. There was no flirting, no pressure, just connection. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a broken man. I didn't tell her about Melissa. Not yet. But I felt a small spark. And that spark reminded me I was still alive. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Rebuilding isn't about revenge. It's about becoming whole again. But revenge will come as a byproduct." I imagined Melissa's life back in Chicago. Was she still with him? Did she regret her words? I didn't know, and I didn't care enough to ask. All I knew was that my silence was louder than any argument. A year after leaving, I had built a modest but steady life. I managed projects for Marcus, earning respect from crews who once called me rookie. I had muscles I'd never had before, discipline carved into my days. And slowly, I was piecing together the man I wanted to become. I wasn't healed completely. Scars don't vanish. But I was no longer bleeding, and that difference mattered. One night, sitting on my balcony with Pixel's head in my lap, I realized something. Melissa's betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the inciting incident, the spark that forced me to rebuild into someone stronger. I closed my notebook and whispered, "She thought it was one night. For me, it was the night I was reborn." 2 years had passed since the night I drove away from my house with 2 suitcases and Pixel sitting quietly in the passenger seat. 2 years since Melissa's voice echoed in my ears. "It's just one night, Ethan. With him, he's my dream man." 2 years since I swore I would never beg again. Those 2 years shaped me. I worked until my hands bled, saved every dollar I could, built strength in the gym, discipline in my mind. The man who had walked out broken was gone. In his place was someone sharper, calmer, unshakable. Then fate pulled me back to where it all began. Marcus, now my business partner, said he couldn't attend a real estate and contracting summit. He asked me to go in his place. The summit was in Chicago, the very city where Melissa still lived. At first, my stomach knotted. Chicago was full of ghosts. Restaurants we'd dined at, theaters we'd laughed in, the streets we had once called ours. But the fear that used to grip me was gone. I wanted to see how it would feel to walk into that city as the new me. The flight was quiet. I watched the clouds and thought of everything I had survived. When the skyline appeared sharp against the lake, my chest tightened, but not with dread. It felt like a test, and I was ready to pass it. The hotel was massive, full of marble floors and golden light. I wore a suit that fit me perfectly, not extravagant, but sharp enough to command respect. I shook hands, spoke with confidence, and realized that I belonged in those rooms. No one there could guess I had once been a man gutted by betrayal. And then, across the lobby, I saw her. Melissa. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray. Her dress was elegant, but hung a little loose, like she'd lost weight. She laughed politely at a colleague's joke, but her eyes seemed tired, dim. Then she turned and saw me. Her smile fell. The glass in her hand trembled. For a split second, time bent. I remembered her words, her shrug, her overnight bag. But instead of breaking, I straightened my shoulders. I gave her a polite nod, nothing more, and turned back to my conversation. Later, she found me by the bar. "Ethan," she whispered, as though saying my name might shatter something fragile. I turned slowly. "Melissa." She stared at me, eyes wide. "You look different." "I am different," I said. She swallowed. "Can we talk? Please?" I considered walking away, but some part of me wanted this closure, so I gestured to a corner table and we sat. Up close, the years had carved themselves into her face. Lines etched around her mouth, shadows under her eyes. She looked like someone who had been fighting battles and losing. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. "I made a mistake," she blurted out. "One night turned into more. He wasn't who I thought. He used me. He left me. I lost everything." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I miss you, Ethan. I want us back." Her words once would have been my salvation. Now they were weightless. I sipped my drink, let silence stretch until it became unbearable for her. Then I said, "Melissa, you didn't just cheat. You killed trust. You burned forever. There's no back." Her face crumpled. "But I was foolish. I thought you'd forgive me. I thought love was enough." She reached across the table, her fingers trembling, desperate to touch my hand. I pulled mine back before she could. The rejection hit her harder than any words. "I've been alone," she whispered. "I regret everything." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You thought it was just one night. For me, it was the night I was reborn. You left me to die, but I lived. And the man I became isn't yours." She broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks, shoulders shaking. "Please, Ethan. Please give me one more chance." I shook my head slowly. "No. I gave you my whole life once. You threw it away for a fantasy. You thought I'd crumble. Instead, I built a life you'll never touch." Her sobs grew louder. A few heads turned. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and looked at her one last time. "You lost me, Melissa. That's permanent." Then I walked away. I didn't look back. Outside, the Chicago night was cold, but my chest was warm. I finally understood closure. It wasn't her apology. It was my indifference. It was knowing she no longer had power over me. The rest of the summit was a blur of victories. I secured contracts that would double our company's revenue. I impressed leaders who once would have ignored me. Every handshake was another reminder of who I had become. On the flight home, I thought of Claire and Pixel. Claire, who had shown me patience when I didn't deserve it. Pixel, who had been my loyal shadow through storms and silence. They were my real family now. When I landed, Claire hugged me like she never wanted to let go. Pixel barked, tail wagging furiously, leaping into my arms. I laughed, a deep, real laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. In that moment, I knew. Revenge had already happened. Revenge isn't screaming. It isn't hurting someone back. Revenge is walking past your betrayer with calm eyes and a full life. Revenge is becoming untouchable. That night, I sat on the porch with Claire and Pixel, the stars scattered above us. I opened the old notebook I had carried since the motel days. Its pages were filled with scars of ink, promises I once whispered to myself in the dark. On the final page, I wrote, "She thought it was one night. It was my rebirth, and I won." I closed the book and exhaled. Melissa would carry her regret for the rest of her life. But me, I carried freedom, and that freedom was louder than vengeance. I was no longer her husband. I was no longer her victim. I was Ethan, the man who survived, rebuilt, and thrived. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. Would you have forgiven or walked away like I did? Your voice matters, and I can't wait to read your thoughts.